You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
Science is a modern religion. Everyone's a skeptic. If their doctor doesn't say so, if it's on the news, if a scientist doesn't say so, it's not true. You and I know those experiences are powerful, but to change a culture, change a civilization, we have to approach it in a scientific way. I think that's why we want to build up the data. And I think the more data, the more databases we have on these beautiful changes that happen over and over and over again, that will really give us a step forward to change the culture. Your brain waves, your energy signature, your brain. You have the 4 core brain waves: delta, theta, alpha, and beta, and gamma. They're waves going across the brain, and by reading how they appear in the brain, we can see a lot about what's going on. And these brain waves are basically the physical structures of the brain, millions of neurons firing at once. That creates that wave. For someone from your retreat, I forget who she was, I mentioned the brain mapping. She goes, "Oh, is that like auras?" I'm like, well, kind of, because we're taking an energy signature of that person. So for me, kind of like an acupuncturist that looks at the tongue as a hologram and sees the health of the body, we can look at those brain waves and see different things. That's that person's energetic signature coming from their brain.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with you, the host, Sam Believ. Today I'm having a conversation with Luke Jensen. Luke is a former U.S. Marine and a National Guard veteran turned psychedelic researcher and neurofeedback practitioner. After battling PTSD, he began working with Ayahuasca and Wachuma in Peru, where he now leads veteran-focused retreats. Luke is known for pioneering the first QEEG brain mapping studies on these plant medicines, bringing neuroscience with ancient healing traditions. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Luke, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Luke, tell us your story. I kind of touched on it in the bio, but can you go a little deeper? What brought you?
Yeah, so I joined the United States military in 2003. It was right after 9/11. A couple years after that. At the time, it was the war on terror, so it was a very patriotic time in the United States. And I joined the Marine Corps because it's the most challenging branch that I could do. And then 6 years later, I switched to National Guard, an airborne infantry unit, and I deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. So that's kind of how my military career started.
Cool. And then how was the journey from ex-military to what you do now?
So yeah, I went to Afghanistan, and then my views in the war changed a lot. What I was doing changed a lot, and there's a whole story with that. But basically, when I got back, I had severe anxiety symptoms. I wasn't really sure what they were from, and I also experienced like this extreme sense of searching for my purpose in life. And this led me to ayahuasca eventually. And about a couple years later, I went to ayahuasca to try to find my purpose, to help with my PTSD symptoms, and just for something else, anything else that could really help me out.
So how did it go, your ayahuasca experience?
So yeah, the first time was like 10 years ago. It was in 2014. And, when you read about these things, I read a lot of books at the time, but they really don't explain what's really going to happen. So my first experience was extremely powerful. The first night I was there, actually, nothing happened. And sometimes this happens with people where nothing will happen that first experience. But the second night was just completely awe-inspiring. I was in Iquitos in the jungle, and I was in a maloca that was about 20 feet off the ground because it floods. So just the whole place was very interesting. Had kind of like an eerie feel, like you're on a sailing ship, because when you're in ayahuasca, everything moves a bit. So I was going on these walkways and they were moving. And I remember the time that someone said, well, don't stay outside too long, because I was going to the latrine to go to the bathroom, come back in. But I was outside. I looked at the jungle, and my first powerful experience on ayahuasca was looking at the jungle. And it was this pretty much experience of complete awe I've never ever had in life at all. I looked at the jungle, and it looked like everything was one and connected. And there was these lines of energy moving through everything, and everything was connected. Everything was one. It was a very profound experience. And then part of ayahuasca is purging. So I purged over the side. I'm on this walkway 20 feet up. And what I see is the earth open up and accept all this negative energy coming out of me. I saw my purge go 1,000 miles into the earth, and this overall acceptance. So immediately I had a very powerful experience very quick. And when I went back to the Maloka, I saw the shaman healing people. I saw auras. Everything you can really think of, I was seeing at this moment. It was extremely powerful, extremely magical. And it was at that time I realized there's a lot more to the human existence than we learn in school in Western societies.
That sounds really nice. I've had quite a few of those all feeling experiences where one was actually pretty recent, maybe 3 months ago or so. I was in the ceremony. I was sitting outside of the Maloka, and we're not in the jungle, but we're, for Americans or Europeans, they think we're in a jungle, but it's actually more of a countryside. Like there's some forests, some pastures, and a little bit of jungle. And I was sitting there, and I was just looking at the nature, and I had this awe feeling, but it was also accompanied with like a realization that everything right now and every atom in the universe is exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah.
There is no like, oh, I should have been this way, I should have been that way. No, like this is how it is, and just like everything is perfect. And the feeling of connectedness. And I remember I was kind of sitting there because one of the patients were sort of freaking out, and I was helping him out, and I was on my process as well. And I started, which is normally we don't do it, but I started talking to him, and I was like, I just wish everyone can feel this at least once in their life before they die. But when you're talking about your first ceremony and like lack of connection, I'm sure now you yourself, as someone who organizes the retreats, you deal a lot with people like, oh, I'm not connecting, and this. First of all, talk about this. Like, how do you view this connection or lack of connection right now? What do you explain to the people that come to your events? And then I have an idea for a study that we can do together.
Okay. Well, just I want to touch upon that awe experience you had. I think is one of the most powerful experiences people can have on plant medicines, to look at the universe, the complete awe and wonderment and connectedness, and that sense that everything's perfect. There's something really special about that. And I agree that it's these events that really shape our spiritual lives, in my opinion. It's not so much based on faith. I mean, faith can come and go, but when you have an event where you're connected like that, it allows you to feel differently, and that feeling allows you to connect to the universe differently. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, my first experience, I was really preparing the whole time. I was meditating. I was doing the proper ayahuasca diet. I think I was even eating every other day for a while. And everything you do, I prepared a lot. And nothing happened my first ceremony. And everyone else had these amazing experiences, just really powerful experiences. I'm like, what happened to me? So now that I'm more experienced with ayahuasca, I agree. Sometimes ayahuasca takes time to work into the system, and sometimes you yourself have to be open in a certain way, and you have to let it happen. So, being there myself and having people come down, people travel across the world for this experience, and it's really tough when like the first ceremony, maybe first two ceremonies, nothing happens. But the ayahuasca is still working on you no matter what, whether you experience a vision or not, the healing's still happening. And it takes that time to open up and to remind people that this isn't just a quick pill. This is a process they have to experience.
Yeah, so that's that gave me the idea. So that's exactly what I tell to people, including, interestingly enough, we had a veteran who came to the retreat, and he did entire retreat and didn't feel anything. And we were like giving him more and more medicine, and he was like, this is bullshit, it's not working, and he left home really frustrated. He came back home, his wife said, you've changed. His kids said, you've changed. And then 6 months afterwards, he messaged me asking me to send him a logo of Loira because he wanted to tattoo it. And I was like, what are you talking about? You didn't feel much, right? So I was like, even though his experience was largely unconscious, it like changed his life. And so we're going to go to the topic of brain scanning and everything you do. But I have this idea that we should scan people's brains during the ceremony for the first few days, and especially focus on the people who are not connecting and compare their brain states when they're supposedly not connecting to when they are connecting. Because I have a feeling, and of course it's just a theory, that most of the work that's done by ayahuasca is actually unconscious. And if we can prove it that, actually, by the way, your brain looks exactly like the brain of a person that is deeply tripping and reporting all kinds of visions, maybe we could find a way to kind of prove that even though you're not really feeling much, something is actually happening. Or maybe I'm wrong with that guess. Like, what would you think the result would be of that study, and how plausible is it for us to do something like that? And then maybe take the topic into the brain scanning idea.
Yeah, so when doing brain mapping, it is challenging sometimes to do it during ceremony, unless someone has experience, can sit still. So you have to keep that in mind because it's very sensitive. It can be done for sure, and we've done that, but that's something to keep in mind. No, it's a very interesting theory. I think there's definitely a process happening without the experience. Is it increased with the experience? Is it same? Is it different? Yeah, I'm not really sure. That's a really good question. And sometimes I'll go into a project thinking one thing and brain imaging a brain, and the result is not what I expected. So just to figure out one way or another, I don't think anyone's done that. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, so talk to us about the brain scanning, because that's kind of going to be a big part of that podcast today. What is it? How is it called properly? What is it that you do, and why do you do it?
So I do what's called QEEG brain mapping. It's basically reading the brain waves. So an EEG is what you see in the hospital, raw brain waves going across the screen. A QEEG is quantitative, and it puts the brain waves in a topographical map and different spectrums, delta, theta, alpha, and beta. Those are major brain waves. And how your brain waves appear, we can see so many different things about people now. So we can see markers for depression, anxiety, head trauma, focus issues. So the reason I got into this, after the Marine Corps, I was in a really big search for healing after my deployment to Afghanistan. So I was looking for anything and everything. And I tried meditation, hypnosis, acupuncture, yoga, and all those things helped a little bit, but none of them really shifted me in a way that I really needed. And someone in Omaha, Nebraska, where I live, where I'm from, she brain mapped me. She was a friend. And she did this brain map, this QEEG, and there was a marker for basically PTSD or anxiety. And for me, at the time, it was very liberating, because modern psychology really says, like, there's something wrong with you, and you go into those deep issues. And I was the kind of person, being a military guy, to go talk to a psychiatrist or a therapist. But if I looked at a brain map and saw this brain pattern that was off, there's a way to train it. And one way is neurofeedback. There's different kinds of methods, but what I learned was neurofeedback. It's basically using like technology to train brainwaves. And when you train these brainwaves, you can shift your state and shift how you feel. And once I started reading about it, I started reading everything about it, every book I could find. And I found out there's a large spiritual component to brainwaves. If you think of shamanism or you think of meditation, all those are certain brainwaves. They're accessing states, neurological states, and these states are trained. So I found it very interesting because for trained spiritual states, we could potentially use this technology to train people faster, or maybe heal people faster. So I had this inspiration that this technology would work very beautifully in conjunction with plant medicines. Not only could we brain map people pre-retreat, post-retreat, and see the changes in the brain, but we could also use this training technology to enhance people to their peak ability, peak performance, peak spiritual abilities. So this whole process started, I would say 10 years ago. I've been reading about it and get buying small devices. And 5 or 6 years ago, I met my mentor, and I met him at a conference for neurofeedback and brain mapping. I told him my idea. I didn't think anyone would really go for it because it sounded so foreign. And he goes, I've been waiting to meet someone like you. I'll train you. And it turns out, his name is Dr. Suter. It turns out he's one of the top people in the field. And he's a Zen Buddhist. He's also, expert meditator, and I would say a shaman, even though he doesn't call himself that. So there's this beautiful relationship that formed, and I went back to Peru with this equipment and started brain mapping people and doing the work I'm doing now.
Amazing. So it's interesting that with this technology, like with mental health, let's say somebody's depressed and then they feel not depressed or maybe less depressed, and it's really hard to measure. But if you can like scan the brain and say, well, you're depressed, and you can scan the brain, well, you're no longer depressed. Like, were you able to then eventually measure your brain and say, well, I no longer have PTSD? Or is it completely gone? Or maybe it's not gone? Or if it is gone, how long did it take?
So yeah, really good question. So the brain mapping is one lens to look at the brain. It's not really meant for diagnosis. It's meant for like, hey, we see markers for this, we see markers for this, we see markers for this. And it offers a path to healing. So look at a brain map as a roadmap. So, okay, if that area of the brain is dysregulated, that's what we call it. And we want to, so for example, PTSD or anxiety pattern is high beta at the back of the brain. If we train that down, that person should feel better. And so we're basically working to make the brain more efficient to make them feel better. So just like anything else, like each person is differently. Some brains are more rigid and harder to move. So if trauma is deeper in the system, that brain might be more challenging. But generally speaking, this brain training offers people a unique way to heal that's different from talk therapy, that's different from drugs, different from plant medicines. And I love plant medicines, but it's one more tool in the toolbox. And I think for those tough cases, especially like I think I was one of my own toughest cases, it allows a synergy. So for example, think of plant medicines. What do? They increase neuroplasticity. They increase the openness of the brain. Most depression, anxiety, for example, the brain's become too rigid. It can't think novelly. It can't think of novel solutions. Whether feeling novelly or thinking of novel solutions to get out of whatever situation they might be in. So the plant medicines opens up that neuroplasticity, and we can measure that with brain mapping. And what I do with the brain training is to increase that neuroplasticity even more. So I'm leveraging both off each other.
Yeah, the synergy is important because sometimes plant medicines can serve as, giving that flexibility and giving hope and giving relief. And then you can combine it with therapy or, like in your case, brain training. What is the, speaking about neuroplasticity and brain health in general, what is the importance of the brain health in mental health?
Oh, it's critical. It's critical. Most people understand, and neuroscience is bearing this out, is that most mental health issues, 50% or more than that, are related to brain health. So when your brain is not working right, you're not going to feel right. And you can really understand this with physical health, right? If you have a poor diet, poor gut health, eating lots of sugars, not exercising, you're not going to feel good. And the same thing with the brain. If your brain, over time, which we all have, in the life we live in the modern world, all brains have wear and tear from stress, from just going through life, the diet we have and things like that. So if we make the brain healthier, that person will feel better. So that's a huge component of what we're doing and how we look at it. I think often when people experience plant medicines or they experience any kind of healing, they always have to make sure their physical health is part of that. If there's a liver issue, if there's a thyroid issue. So you have to look at the wholeness of the person. And you talked about the experience wearing off. That was one of the biggest things I want to put this field in, or this neurofeedback side of it in, because we train people in different places in the world with remote neurofeedback training. And when they come to our retreats, we can send them home with a remote device and keep working with them, because the plant medicines offer this beautiful space of neuroplasticity. And it's like you were saying, this is a good place to pick up when the people get home, pick up yoga, qigong, many different practices, meditation, and ours, what we work with is neurofeedback. So that beautiful window of neuroplasticity is really amazing, and people should always take advantage of it after ayahuasca to do a new habit or change their life in a way that they want.
Yeah, and be careful with this beautiful window of neuroplasticity because it's a double-edged sword, and it can also allow you to be more flexible in adopting negative habits. So that's what we warn people every time. Talking about like brain health and mental health. Me and Luke and another person I interviewed a while ago, Ian McCall, we're now working on this idea to organize an ayahuasca retreat for UFC fighters specifically here at Loira, and we will measure their brains because of the traumatic brain injury. So like traumatic, I mean, it's probably as bad as it gets brain health wise, because their brains are like pretty scrambled, those really heavy hits. Have you had any experience so far with traumatic brain injury, working with it with ayahuasca or brain entrainment? What do you know about that? What have you observed so far?
Yes, we do. And we have really fascinating data on that. We had a Muay Thai fighter. She's from Colorado. Her name's Faith. And she came down to one of our retreats and she got KO'd. She was knocked out about a month before our retreat. So she had a significant pattern for inflammation in her brain. And then after 1 week, 9 days of our retreat, 3 ayahuasca ceremonies and 1 Wachuma ceremony, that brain inflammation went down significantly, very significantly. It was almost not there anymore. So yeah, I think we're looking at something really unique for fighters, for anyone with head trauma, veterans or anyone else, but fighters as such a big thing in that community. Ayahuasca can definitely, from preliminary observation, help with head trauma.
Amazing. This is really promising because it's also very, very quick, right? You said just this one retreat and you can see noticeable changes. And we've had people get some relief from migraines and things like that as well through ayahuasca. Even though sometimes I feel ayahuasca gives you headache when you drink it, but it almost feels like it's because like just working and like there's like blood flowing and then afterwards you feel better. I don't know if it's a legit guess.
Yeah, I mean, headaches, it might be. Headaches can cause by so many different things. Sometimes they're muscle tension. And the biggest thing about headaches is, I'm guessing when that person is done with the retreat, they'll have less headaches because their nervous system's more calm, because so many headaches are caused of nervousness.
Mm. And you mentioned Wachuma, right? You do those medicines as well together, and I believe you've done one of the first studies on Wachuma and brain scanning, right? So talk to us about that study. What did you find? And then maybe talk to us a little bit about Wachuma.
Yeah. So I was looking at different things to brain map, and as much science has been done in the last 10 years, a lot still hasn't been done. And I looked at all the research, and as far as I could tell, there was no brain imaging whatsoever on Wachuma. So my study was the first study to brain image Wachuma. And what we did, we had 10 subjects. It's exploratory research. So it's in the field with a shaman, with Wachuma. We didn't try to control every variable like they would in a clinic, but exploratory research allows us to see things that maybe they wouldn't. So we had pre-maps, during the acute experience, and post-maps. And no, so just doing this anyway was really fun, getting 10 people together and researching it, and all your friends and stuff like that. And then we have a really good shaman. But then we looked at the data and we saw a significant change in each person's brain. And each person changes differently. So this is what surprised me. I think this is part of plant medicines that needs to be understood more. And I think this will change our view of trauma as well. But the short of it is that whatever the brain needs, it seems to get. So if a person has an overactive brain, like overthinking brain, it seems to slow down. If that person is disassociating, that seems to heal. If they have an ADD or focus issue, that seems to get better. If their brain has low power, it seems to raise the power. So it works in a way that whatever they need, including physical things like healing from head trauma, they seem to get from the plant experience. And each person, some people probably less, some people probably more, but everyone's changing in a healthy way, which I was not expecting because I think about prescription drug would all push people the same direction. But plant medicines are very unique in that they don't.
It's interesting because that's what we keep telling people, right? Ayahuasca is going to give you what you need, not what you want. And you have proof for it. That's pretty cool. Or plant medicines in general. So, tell us about what is Wachuma, and what do you notice similar or different to ayahuasca, both from experiential point of view and also from the brainwaves point of view?
So Wachuma is a cactus in the Andes. It has mescaline in it, just like peyote, but the other alkaloids are probably different and the experience is likely different. I've never tried peyote. So ayahuasca for me, and I'll use some spiritual language here too and scientific language, but I really like the spirit of it. So ayahuasca for me, you take it at night, you take it with a shaman, you take it at a maloka or a temple. And in the Shipibo experience in Peru, it's very much inward, very much going to the subconscious, very much the inner work. When we use Wachuma in our style, we go on hikes. So we'll go on a hike in the Andes Mountains. And it's not strong enough, or we don't give people a strong enough dose to really send them too far out there because we want them to take the experience back. So Wachuma is much more heart opening. It can be, it's often used in nature. So when hiking, the whole universe feels alive. Like the whole world's breathing, the rocks, and the trees, and the sun, and you're connected in a certain way. From a neuroscience point of view, and we've seen some different indications of Wachuma, it seems like a default node network in the back of the brain is being reduced. So this is your sense of self. But you think about this in a spiritual way, when that comes down, you're going to naturally feel more connected to the world around you. There's so much barriers. You're going to be more one with everything. So the neuroscience and the feeling really go together. It's very beautiful in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Wachuma myself, or San Pedro as they call it as well. It's a very, very, very different medicine from ayahuasca, but still very, very valuable. Interestingly, like when you talk about drinking ayahuasca and going inwards, when you're at night and in the dark, that's kind of what you do. But have you ever tried ayahuasca during the day ceremony?
I have not. Have you?
Yeah, so we at our 1 week retreats we do 4 ceremonies, and there's 3 night ceremonies and 1 day ceremony, and same medicine, same maloka, just different time of the day, and people have very different experience. And it's a lot of it is this kind of like observing outside and seeing the nature. So kind of the format we have is people go inwards and they heal and they focus on themselves and they kind of move that trauma around, and then the last day it's like celebration. And it seems very, very different. So, yeah, it's not just the medicines, but also like the way you do it and how you do it. But of course, like different traditions have different rules. Like I know Shipibos are very like, they like darkness and no fire, and Inga tradition, like Colombian tradition with which we work, they have fire, they have candles, and they also do day ceremonies occasionally as well. So it's something you can try when you come visit us when we do the UFC retreat.
Yeah, I'd love to. That sounds great.
So, I mean, this idea for the UFC retreat is still kind of new. We're still working it out. So hopefully it happens. What do you think? Like, what do you personally think? 15, 20 UFC fighters drinking ayahuasca together. I think
that's gonna be a lot of fun. It can be very interesting. Well, I think the whole community is really open to ayahuasca. I mean, especially with Joe Rogan and everything like that. And I think that's really good for them. Because I think UFC fighters and the way they live are just very visceral people. They live in a certain way. They live like a very strong way. And I think ayahuasca too, you have to have that kind of sense of courage and bravery to go experience this. And it's not for the light of heart. And it's a different kind of challenge, but it's a personal challenge and a work challenge. But I think it'd be perfect for guys like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels between UFC fighters and the veterans. Do you reckon UFC fighters also have PTSD?
Yeah, I think, it's very interesting to think about. I know a couple actually just through sheer chance. And, one, that kind of life can lead to head trauma, but also, trauma as well. And also often some of the fighters I met or know, they often get into this sport because of trauma, right? One of my jiu-jitsu black belts, his mom left or his dad left. So he didn't have a father in the house. So that's why he got into jiu-jitsu. He wanted to be the best fighter. He wanted to be the man of the household. And so I think a lot of those things can happen from trauma as well. So yeah, interesting question. I think some of it, some of them probably do have PTSD.
So talking about PTSD, can you tell us a little about your own journey of working with PTSD, the role plant medicines played in it? Because I'm sure it was not just like you having a couple ceremonies and it just went away.
Yeah, no, it's really been like a journey of 10 years or more. And I've always been kind of careful with that term PTSD. I think it's true and accurate. It has like a scientific validity. But you also have to remember that each person's different. Each person's their own being. And what they've gone through is their unique experience. So I think part of shamanism is bringing it back to that personal experience, that soul experience, rather than Western medicines, a one-size-fit-all medication. So I think Carl Jung talked about every real issue people are having is a spiritual issue. And I think that's widely true for mental health. And PTSD at its core, I think also is a spiritual issue. Like these are spiritual problems. We don't look at it that way in the modern Western view because we are very materialistic, but all of our ancients looked at it this way. So if you look at healing a spiritual problem, like a wound from war, a traumatic event, I mean, trauma itself is a new word, right? Like event of violence. Maybe you see your kid die, or maybe you see your friend die, or maybe just being in a war zone itself. So that leaves a certain energetic imprint. And I use the term energy very specifically because there's also an energy to that. And that requires, I think, a certain amount of energetic healing or spiritual healing. So I think shamanism, ayahuasca shamanism, and shamanism in general offers a very powerful way of healing that's outside the Western model of prescription drugs and talk therapy and things like that, like going to that core. And I think that people that have experienced PTSD and have done ayahuasca, it's often not a very quick route. It doesn't happen in a few ceremonies, and it takes time. And often that first retreat is sometimes the first step to a different life, but that road is challenging, and it's not a perfect path or a straight path. So for me, my early ceremonies, I was tortured a lot. And I had that good ceremony described, but my other ceremonies was like soul torture. That torture, that spiritual torture, was actually cleansing. It cleansed those wounds. It cleansed that dark energy. It cleansed those inner demons, and it allowed me to be more me. And I think that's really the true goal in life. In Jungian psychology, is individuation, connecting to your soul. And that's what plant medicines allow you to do. And that's what the work that needs to be done with, I think, wounds of war.
Soul torture is a great way to describe it. So have you ever, out of curiosity, have you ever measured the shaman's brain during the ceremony? See what's going on there?
Not during the ceremony. I really want to do that. I've brain mapped some shaman's brains outside ceremony, but that could be really interesting. I don't know if that's been done. So to be honest, part of my goal in the field is to do things that really haven't been done. There's so much low-hanging fruit in such a beautiful field. I want to see these things. And it's kind of cool. Like when I brain image Wachuma, I'd be like, wow, this is the first time anyone's ever seen this. So in my field, neurofeedback field, someone went and brain mapped all these yogis around India. And it was a famous field study. No one's ever done that with shamans yet. So it'd be really cool to go around and brain map shamans during the experience and outside the experience and see what their brains look like and see what's happening, because that research, as far as I know, hasn't been done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great idea. So I'm I'm volunteering my shaman for some scanning. I'm gonna have to ask him, but he's pretty cool and pretty open to new things. Like, we're doing this documentary and he was in it and he's open to talk about it. He's not a shy guy, so I think he'll be pretty cool if we measure him. And then we can measure some other shamans and be like, my shaman's signal is stronger than yours,
Well, it's funny because a lot of the local shamans I've noticed really like the brain mapping and like the science. And that kind of surprised me. It's lots of the Westerners like, hey, what do you bring the science stuff in here for, And the Peruvians, at least the Peruvians I've met, are really into it. So that's been cool.
Yeah, I mean, because the Westerners sort of expect indigenous people to be stuck in time and like never really adjust or improve, or they want them to be like exactly as they are, because that's their kind of their own fetishized version of as my previous head of facilitation, he used to say, the cult of magical brown men. It's like they're perfect. They have no downside. They're like almost not human, like godlike.
Yeah, no, that could be a whole podcast. I think it's very interesting how we project our ideals onto them, and that there's these perfect, happy jungle people. And I think one thing to realize with shamans is that they can have tons of ability and their personal life can still be messed up, or they can have their own issues with alcoholism, but be amazing in the space. So they're very, very different people, and learn that culture and who they are adds a depth to it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but they're real people just like we're real people. We can't put them on this. We can't make them cardboard cutouts of what we want them to be.
Yeah, it's like my shaman. He's a great shaman. He's indigenous, comes from lineage, grows his own ayahuasca in the jungle, but he's pretty modern. He wears sneakers. He uses WhatsApp and stuff like that, which is actually very useful when you try to organize anything. The people, it's like, like they imagine like he has to be like bare feet, and it's like civilization happened to them as well. Like they, like right now in the deepest jungle of Amazon, you can have a Starlink, and it kind of creates new challenges. Like I've seen this.
Oh yeah.
Video about people getting Starlink, and then they all got addicted to their phones because they never had TV, so they did not develop the resistance. But yeah, going back to science, like we know ayahuasca works because obviously I've had a couple thousand people at my retreat alone, and they come and then they leave and they feel so much better. And then I meet them like at MAPS. We met at MAPS, and there were 3 other people that came to Loara before, and they're like, oh my God, they were like, 2 of them were becoming a therapist now because they had this experience and they just loved it and they want to like explore it. And they're like, you changed my life. It's a very uncomfortable for me always to like receive the praise, but I know it works because I've seen so many stories. But now we sort of almost need science to prove it. It's kind of like, it's like guilty until proven not guilty. Like we have to do this process now. So like, talk about that, the science and the whole fact that we kind of need it to prove that something that we kind of know already works.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point, because so many people come down, we know it works, their individual lives are changed. I worked at a retreat, and its motto was, we change the world one person at a time. And I think that's true. But I also think that if we bring the data, if we bring the science, say, over a course of a couple years, and it's one of my goals to assemble hundreds of brain maps. That'd be such a huge analysis that science would have to look at that, or at least they should. And science is a modern religion, right? Everyone's a skeptic. If their doctor doesn't say so, if it's on the news, if a scientist doesn't say so, it's not true. So, you and I know those experiences are powerful, but to change a culture, change a civilization, at least the way it is now, we have to approach it in a scientific way. I think that's why we want to build up the data. And I think the more data, the more databases we have on these beautiful changes that happen over and over and over again, that'll really give us a step forward to changing the culture.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said the retreat's motto was healing the world one person at a time. Our motto at Loara is now connect, heal, grow. But when we were brainstorming the motto, my personal favorite was healing the world one cup at a time. So I guess I'm not that original.
Well, I mean, it's probably not, they're not original. It's probably there's like a fundamental truth, archetypal truth that we're all picking up on. Like, wait, this will spread this cup to this cup and this person, more people. I mean, that's true. It's definitely true. And I think we're picking up that the idea that ayahuasca is working through each one of us. And that phrase, be the change that you hear, is so true. If you change and people around you like, hey, what's different? What'd you do? I did ayahuasca. That spreads. So it's definitely true.
So you say science is a modern religion. I also heard you say in another podcast that it's a problem that we're lacking religion. Why is it so?
Oh, I think that at the core, Western civilization is lacking a grounding spirituality. And if you look at any healthy civilization, it had a spiritual outlook to its civilization. As a people, as a nation, as a group of nations, they always had this spiritual idea that the gods are watching after them, or they had a spiritual mission as a people beyond their lives, beyond just acquiring, material possessions. And when you look at civilization's decline, you often see that spiritual spark that fueled them in the beginning, start to leave or start to fade. And I think we're in that stage in Western civilization where we're seeing that spark fade, and to really have a healthy civilization, which requires healthy people, right? It requires a people that have like mind and believe in a spiritual mission and something higher than themselves, that you need a core group of people to have a healthy civilization. So I really look at what we're doing as a higher order of work that hopefully will lead to more people doing this and affect the civilization and change in a healthy way. I think most people's religion today is either politics or science or a combination of both, that they're constantly obsessed with what people are doing on TV, what people are doing in a city 1,000 miles away. And the modern priests are the scientists. But the scientists have their own religion. Science is a method of observation. It's not to tell you what's right or wrong. It's merely a tool. And we're using that tool to study plant medicines, for example. But these research universities, for example, have billions of dollars of funding and have spent hardly any of that in this kind of research, which is mind-boggling. So it gives you a view of a civilization's priorities, where they put their energy at.
Yeah, the problem with science is somebody has to pay for it. So if you're a pharmaceutical company, you will pay for the science around your product. Because ayahuasca in a way does not really belong to anyone. Science is, it comes from like churches. I know there was some science done in Brazil and stuff like that. But yeah, in the end, someone has to pay for it. So that's why science can be biased one way or another, one direction or another.
But yeah, just on that, just really quickly, science today, yeah, exactly that. These huge corporations and pharmaceutical companies. But 19th century, there were explorers in science. There were, Edison and Tesla and Jefferson, many different inventors were just a single person doing something. And that back then it can make an impact. But today the civilizations has changed and how that works.
Yeah, in a way, let's say I run an ayahuasca retreat and I observe 1,000 people every year healing through ayahuasca. That's science. I know it works, but it's the problem is now, how are you going to prove it? Because nobody going to believe you. I mean, I'm kind of working on it and talking to you and also to other people about creating the proper paperwork. So it's not just an observation, but a legit science. How does one do science these days? I mean, you publish some studies. Tell us the process.
Well, so for me, like I said, I was in the Marine Corps in Afghanistan, and I was infantry in Afghanistan, and I never really saw myself doing this. I became a field researcher, basically, and my mentor's company has supported me in many ways because they're interested in this research. So keep in mind that science has always have to be done in a university setting or academic setting, and probably the best science is actually done outside those settings. And so in the 19th century, for example, many of those scientists had sponsors that just sponsored their work in the private sector. There was no such thing as huge university grants. And I think we're going to have to start looking at different ways to approach science, because the way the university system works and the grant system works is that now everything's so established, they're not going to risk it on something that's speculative. They're going to use that science to say their ideas are right over and over and over again, because that's where the money's at and they know they'll get it right. But they won't use it to risk something different.
Yeah. We have the big pharma promoting different stuff. Now we need big ayahuasca promoting ayahuasca studies. I believe in citizen science. We should all be a bit of scientists. And now, we have YouTube to learn and ChatGPT, and there's nothing stopping anyone from doing anything anymore. And you yourself sort of proving it, because you're learning neuroscience by yourself. You went from being a veteran to now finding your mentor. Talk to us about that process. How is it because you're not in the university, but I'm sure you know more than some graduates.
Well, as far as brainwaves go, I probably know as much as most graduates. So if you go to a university degree for neuroscience, you get a lot of the chemistry and the structures of the brain and those, minute chemical reactions. So the field that I do with brainwaves, there's not really a college degree for it. You have to go to the people in the world that know it. Some people have college degrees. Probably most people do have an advanced degree, but not everyone does. And it's really this Western model where you think that healing has to look a certain way, or science has to look a certain way, or even expertise, right? The shamans you work with don't have a written diploma from the University of Shamanism. They have a lineage and tons of experience, and no one questions that, right? So I think we have to look at those things a different way, because that allows us to take in new information. So the credential system also puts people in a certain box and how they think. You need people to think outside the box, not in the box.
Yeah, not to take away too much from the science, but if you were, let's say, choosing who's going to sit with you in a ceremony, would you choose someone who just completed 1 year training in some fancy facilitation school, or like a shaman who does know how to read, but has been doing it generationally? It's someone who's read a cookbook, or somebody who's been cooking their entire life. What's more valuable? It's just somehow we need to rebalance this. It seems a little bit biased now.
I agree. And actually, when I'm sitting in the jungle, I've been in the deep jungle in Peru and the Amazon, just me, my friend, and a shaman for weeks, months at a time. And all those ideas that we have of way things should be, all those start breaking down. We realize we have so many constructs we can strain ourselves in our thoughts. And that really affects so many things. And it's a constant process to keep an eye on those.
Yeah, we had the booth at MAPS. You came visited us. I think my head of facilitation was a little bit... my previous head of facilitation, he was a little upset because somebody came to him and asked, what methodology do you use? And he's like, well, whatever our shaman is doing, there's a lot of the stuff doesn't have a fancy name, but people, they come and they want to throw terms around. And it was a weird experience, being at MAPS. There's a lot of weirdness in the psychedelic space, in the psychedelic science space. So
coming from the jungle to there is such a huge shift.
It's imagine that you have this, it's like reinventing the bicycle, but let's say it's reinventing the cars. It's in the jungle, you have this imaginary highway full of cars and it's just working. And here you have these people breaking their brains, trying to figure out how to make it work, or explain it with words. Here it is. It's working. Just what are you doing? Why are you trying to reinvent it? But I also understand that there's value to science. And this is why at The Wire, we're going to start doing more science, because I'm just honestly just a little fed up as well with people, not valuing the real results. So it's if you want papers, we'll give you papers. We'll get you papers. Because that's almost, to be honest, that's an easy part. But talking about science a little bit, can you explain like brainwaves? I know people say alpha brainwaves, beta, gamma. Can you just give us like a little tiny course on it?
Yeah. So your brain waves, your energy signature, of your brain. So you have the 4 core brain waves: delta, theta, alpha, and beta, and then the other brainwave, gamma. And each of these brain waves, they're waves going across the brain. And by reading how they appear in the brain, we can see a lot about what's going on. And these brain waves are basically the physical structures of the brain, millions of neurons firing at once. That creates that wave. So in a way, for someone from your retreat, I forget who she was, I mentioned the brain mapping, and she goes, "Oh, is that like auras?" And I'm like, "Well," I go, "No." I'm like, "Well, kind of, because we're taking an energy signature of that person." So for me, it's kind of like an acupuncturist that looks at the tongue as a hologram and sees the health of the body. We can look at those brain waves and see different things. That's that person's energetic signature coming from their brain.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to explain it, because as you said yourself, through ayahuasca, you've seen auras of different people. One time I was in a ceremony and it kind of showed me, I could look inside of the person and see like different colors of different organs, like which one's healthy and which one's not. Hope I could do it on demand, but unfortunately it's like, no, I'm not a shaman yet. But do you reckon one day you'll just be able to scan somebody's brain without any machinery? You'll just be like, your color of your aura is green, so you have alpha waves.
Well, I hope so, because I'm going to continue my own training in that field of the shamanic arts. And I think it's very interesting because the science is proving that we do have auras, we do have energy fields, and there's probably fields we can't read yet, like more subtle fields, like quantum fields. But yeah, I think auras will exist, and as science advances, I think the 21st century will be the century of consciousness if we do this right. We have to change the situation. And once we realize that there's a consciousness and energy inside of us, this could really shift our understanding of ourselves, of humanity. And yeah, I'm really proud to be part of that movement. And I'm having me like you, people like you who are part of that movement as well. Because to understand that we're energy beings first is just so critical to who we are.
Yeah, well, was it Nikola Tesla that said that, if you want to understand the nature of the universe, you need to understand waves, and everything is a wave. I wish I was good at quotes. I'm so...
It was frequency. Everything's frequency, but I could be wrong. But everything's at a vibration, right? And if we look at everything as a vibration and not as a solid, everything's moving, this constant cosmic dance, right? So like what the yogis talk about, this cosmic dance of the universe, we're seeing it now through science. And I think we're going to keep seeing more of that.
Cool. So I have another meeting planned, unfortunately, so I have to wrap it up. Just last question. Is ego default mode network? What's that connection? Because I always wanted to ask a neuroscientist about that.
Yeah, so ego is connected to default mode network. It's a sense of self. And obviously there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways. But in the Western world, we're seeing this over connection with ego, and the default mode network's overworking, over connected. So plant medicines allows us to dissolve that or weaken it for a certain period of time for us to shift that energy.
Cool. Beautiful explanation. Any last words you want to tell to the audience, or tell them where they can find more about you and about your work?
Yeah, so I have a website, neuroenlightenment.com, and that goes into my research and what we do. And you see our 2 published studies in that website. And if anyone wants to reach out to me with any questions about what I do, feel free.
Cool, Luke. Thank you so much for the interview. Really interesting angle. And I'm looking forward to meeting you in person and doing this crazy experiment about on the UFC fighters.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, guys. You've been listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, we're the host, Sam Believ, and I will See you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by Lawira Ayahuasca Retreat. At Lawira, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. Lawira, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you.